As we speak about pupil subcultures over here, we know that we should know rather that pupil subcultures fall into the category of in-school factors, where we talk about the interaction amongst the your in-school factors, your social class, and eventually, consequently, how it affects your educational attainment. So we're talking about how your in-school factors, or in other words, your experiences within school are related. Your experiences within school are related to your social class, and how your experiences within school are eventually affecting your educational attainment. So there were a couple of topics that we had over here. We initially had started off with teachers' perception of social class. Then we spoke about the interactionist perspective, followed on by ability grouping, and now we're finally hopping into pupil subcultures. As we speak about pupil subcultures, what exactly does the word pupil subculture mean over here? You could get more of details on this particular topic from the Cambridge endorsed student book that is published by Collins, also referred to as the Purple Book, on page number 297. Now, as we speak about pupil subcultures happen to be the distinctive norms and values that are developed by young people in schools and colleges. So, the distinctive norms and values that are developed by students, the distinctive norms and values that are developed by students, that are developed by young people while they're at school or at college, are being referred to over here as pupil subcultures. So, as we take this ahead, we should also understand, we should also remind ourselves that these distinctive norms that students develop, these distinctive norms could be based on our social class, could be based on our ethnicity, could be based on our gender, and and we should also additionally be reminding ourselves that all of this together influences your overall experiences. Now, we cannot say that, I mean, if you're talking about an individual XYZ, you cannot just say individual XYZ is the way he or she is because of his or her social class. It's not only social class that develops your holistic identity. Along with your social class, it's your ethnicity, it's your gender, and there are a couple of other factors too that together play a very important role in terms of developing your identity, in terms of making you who you are, and consequently in terms of determining how your educational experiences within the education system would be. So, taking this ahead, we're talking about pupil subcultures here. Pupil subcultures, like I said, are the distinctive norms and values developed by young people in schools and colleges. Now, social class, ethnicity, and gender, they intersect together and influence the formation of these subcultures. Now, when we know what the word subculture over here means, we should also be familiar with what the word counter school culture or anti school subculture means. As I refer to the term counter school culture, it has been seen that this is a culture that typically rejects the subcultural that typically rejects the values that are espoused by the school. So when we use the word counter school culture, also referred to as anti school culture, we are talking about a culture being developed within the education system that we see as rejecting, I repeat, that we see as rejecting the norms and values that are there in the school. So moving on, taking this further, it has also been noted that these counter school cultures, they usually are made by students who belong to lower sets. These are the students who typically from the working class. So we're talking about pupil subcultures. We spoke about pupil subcultures, and then we spoke about how there are within while we talk about these pupil subcultures, we should also remind ourselves that within schools, counter school subcultures exist too. And these counter school subcultures, they are typically monopolized by students from the lower sets and the students from the working class origin. Now, as we take this a little further and talk about how this pupil subculture, or how an individual being a part of a particular pupil subculture would affect his or her educational experiences, or the experiences that individual has within the education system. Now, these pupil subcultures, they shape a student's identity. One. Number two, they shape a student's perception of education, how the student perceives the education system. They shape a student's, or rather say, they affect a student's progress at school as well. They affect your examination results as well. They shape or they influence the teacher's perception of that particular pupil as well. And that eventually plays an important role in terms of what particular set, remember we had spoken about the word setting, what particular set a particular student is placed in. So yes, you heard me right. When we talk about pupil subcultures, these pupil subcultures to quite an extent affect the particular set that you have been placed into as well. There are three different examples that I would like to bring in to your knowledge over here. Amongst these three, the first one, the study that was conducted by Paul Willis, this is a study that you have studied before and has been mentioned numerous times while covering this particular unit. And I'm sure for most of you, you have this at the back of your head. In line with Paul Willis's research is another research that was conducted by Mack and Gale, and this is seen by many people as an updated version of Paul Willis's study, because this study was conducted in the year 2004. 2004 makes it good about 20 years ago, but then again, if you compare it with the study that was conducted by Paul Willis, that's around almost, let's just say, 50 years ago. Now, what's new over here is this study that was conducted in China, this study that was conducted by Lin Lui and Eli Ji in 2017. This is again a more recent example. So without any further ado, let me quickly walk you through the study that was conducted by Paul Willis as a quick revision. So this gentleman, Paul Willis, we remember, we need to remind ourselves that we're studying all of this under the heading of the topic pupil subcultures. As we speak about pupil subcultures over here, this study that was conducted by Paul Willis was conducted in a school that was located in a working class area in London, right? So a school that was located in a working class area in UK. Of course, when you're talking about a school that is located in a working class area, if we talk about the demographic composition of that school, the school would have more of students from the working class. And while Paul Willis was conducting his research, the focus of his research revolved around 12 young boys, and these 12 young boys, who of course from the working class, he referred to them as the lads. The word I'm using over here is lads, lads, lads. Now according to Paul Willis, these young 12 boys, they had their own anti-school subculture. They had their own anti-school subculture. You may also refer to this as a counter-school subculture, counter-school culture rather. And when you use the word counter school subculture or anti school subculture, this is when you are rejecting the norms and values of the education system. When you're rejecting the norms and the values, the unstated rules, the unwritten rules that are expected from students to be followed, you rejecting them. So Paul Willis conducted his research in the 1970s. He wrote a book with the name Learning to Labor. Learning to Labor. This book was published in 1977. So if we move on and talk about the characteristics of these lads, these boys were known to misbehave. These boys were known for disrupting classrooms. These boys were known to not value academics. These boys did not show any sort of interest in their qualifications, and their school life experience focused more around having a laugh. Moving on, if we talk about an example of another pupil subculture, now I'm deliberately using the word pupil subculture over and over again so that tomorrow, if you guys get a question in your CIs, you know what references to use. Paul Willis can also be used because Paul Willis's research is a research that you have heard of a lot many times than you've heard of other researchers. So moving on, if we speak about Mack and Gale over here, this research was conducted in the year 2004. This was conducted in an English secondary school. The students over here were from a working class origin, and they belonged to the lowest of sets. Now, about these young boys, they had a pupil subculture too that revolved more on troublemaking, underachievement. These young boys would love acting tough. They looked after their mates, that is their friends, and they focus on their education experience or their experience at school had more to do with having a laugh. They saw teachers looking down on them, and to this, because they felt that the teachers were looking down on them, this in many cases resulted in not enjoying the experience at school, and in many cases this resulted in hostility. Moving on, so this was the second example, right? So you could use the example of Paul Willis, and you could additionally use the example of McIngale too. Taking this further about this research that was conducted by Lin Louis and Eli G in 2017. This is an interesting one here. So Lin Liu, sorry, and Eli G in 2017 conducted a research. They tried examining a deviant group that was formed, that was apparently formed. I'm using the word apparently, formed in a school in China, right? So Liu and Xi in 2017 examined a deviant group in a school in China. Now, when we talk about this, or as we talk about the Chinese culture, we all do have an idea that Chinese people, we expect Chinese people, or we see Chinese people as people belonging to the Chinese origin to be very hardworking. Not only being hardworking, they have their family, their social group, their schools, they all have very high expectations from students. And not everyone is meant to meet those expectations. Not everyone is ready to put in effort to be able to meet those expectations. Not everyone sees himself or herself to be capable enough to get that A or A steric. Now, this research that was conducted by Liu and Ji in 2017, like I said, this examined on a deviant group that was formed in a school in China. Because in China there's a very high expectation that both the parents and the teachers have from students. The students feel a lot pressurized, and amongst this pressure, what they found out was this led to the development of a deviant group or an anti-school group, which was referred by many as the 4+1 group. Now, this group was referred to as the 4+1 group primarily because this involved 5 students. Amongst those 5 students, 4 were males, and there was this one young lady, a female. These students were from the working class origin. There was a conflict. They usually had a conflict with teachers among over the homework and the school pressure the school gave them, right? So these 5 kids, they felt very pressurized. Because perhaps they felt the teachers would give them a lot of homework. They felt like the school was pressurizing them a lot. And as a result, as a consequence, when they were not able to meet those expectations, teachers started labeling them as a deviant group. Because you know what? When everyone else is studying and you along with a few others, you're not able to cope up, you amongst with the ones like you are not able to, or are struggling to meet the expectations that the people around you have, you are labeled as a deviant there, right? You're labeled as a deviant because you are not as good as others are. So the 4+1 group was labeled as a deviant, and they accepted. And not only did they accept this label, they also internalized this label. Remember, this should remind you of the self-fulfilling prophecy, the study that was conducted by Rosenthal and Jacobson. For the ones who do not know self-fulfilling prophecy, let me remind you, self-fulfilling prophecy is a labeling theory. The idea is when you put a label on someone, that label in many cases turns out to be so true that you start believing in yourself in that particular manner. So, in other words, you not only accept that label, you start internalizing that label and acting accordingly, or you start living up to the expectations of that label as well. These young students, they wanted to get the relevant diploma. It's not that these young kids, they did not want to study. I mean, they did not want to be referred to as a dropout. They wanted to receive that relevant diploma, but they wanted the school process to soften a bit. The experience of schooling for them was a bit too harsh. The experience of schooling for them was actually too demanding, which they were not ready to put in efforts accordingly. Now, conclusively, the education system. Now, we can out of this research, or what Liu and Ji concluded was the schooling system is supposed to, or is expected to, do good to the child. However, for these young kids, for this 4+1 group that I'm referring to over here, it actually worked the other way around. So, if anything, the school contributed towards developing a deviant group. If anything, the school contributed towards a negative self concept that these young kids carried for themselves. So the education system can contribute to students engagement and deviance as well, and it is not always the other way around. Now this was a tiny little miniature of how you could put this particular topic, pupil subculture, to use if you're getting any question in your examination that is directly demanding you on knowledge from here, or you being able to write this as a counter argument if anywhere. And let me remind you, all of this comes under the heading of the wider subtopic in school factors, and the effect in school factors have on the educational attainment of pupils.